The Dalai Lama, a spiritual journey. Every person we meet is our brother or sister. I would like to stress this point, which I think is essential. Each person's happiness can make a profound, effective contribution that can improve the entire human community. By realizing that we share the same need to be loved, we have the feeling that in every circumstance, every person we meet is our brother or sister. It doesn't matter if their face is unfamiliar or if their appearance and behavior are unusual. There is no significant chasm between ourselves and others. It doesn't make sense to pay attention to external differences, for our fundamental nature is identical. In the final analysis, humanity is one, and our only home is this little planet. If we want to protect it, each one of us has to experience universal altruism. Only this feeling will eliminate the selfish motives that impel people to take advantage of each other. With a sincere and open heart, we are naturally confident and sure of ourselves, and we have nothing to fear from others. I believe that at all levels of society, family, national, and international, the key to a better, happier world is greater compassion. It is not necessary to become religious or to believe in an ideology. The important thing is to develop our human qualities as much as we can. I try to treat every person I meet like an old friend, and that gives me a real sensation of happiness. The Dalai Lama. Oh, I didn't see you guys come in there. Hello, and welcome to Bitcoin Talk Show. We're joined by Dan, the Crypto Raptor. How's it going, Dan?
It's going fantastic.
And Max Hillebrand from Bitcoin to the Max. How's it going, Max?
What's up, Piers? Nice to be back here on the call-in show and call in. We got hopefully a bunch of questions to answer, and anything that you want to bring up, call in to Skype. Link in the description.
That's right. And of course, we're talking about everything here on Bitcoin Talk Show. So if you mentioned the Super Bowl or the Super Boar, as they're calling it, I'm glad to talk about that. I know you guys don't like sports ball, though, so I'm not going to go there first. Be sure to give us a thumbs up down below. I'm going to go ahead and put the call-in number in the chat. You can Skype us now at World Crypto Network, all one word, or at 1-518-600-1949. Spent some extra time this morning trying to get the calls working on my laptop. Fingers crossed that's going to work, knock on wood, and all those other superstitious nonsense. But I want to go ahead and open it up today with some news and get some comments here from our panel. Kraken acquires a futures startup in a deal worth $100 million. Kraken's going after European Bitcoin futures. They acquired the startup Crypto Facilities. It's a DCG, Digital Currency Group, Barry Silbert's company, one of those. So congratulations to Mr. Silbert, as he's been celebrating on Twitter, a very successful exit for him and his investors. So they did very well. This is good for Kraken, good for Europe, good for Bitcoin. What do you think, Dan, about Kraken and their move into Europe?
Well, I think any expansion into Europe, anywhere around the world is good. I think that the Kraken specifically, they're quite a well-known, well-established exchange as well, and they obviously have got a plan when it comes to expansion into Europe and how they're going to try and tackle that market. I think what's $100 million? Yeah, that's pretty good for Barry Silbert. I don't know how long ago the crypto facilities was started, but man, I'd be very happy to be selling a company for $100 million. That's for sure.
It's certainly a good deal and great for Barry and probably great for Bitcoin and the whole industry. Let's go to Max. What do you think, Max?
Well, Kraken is, in my opinion, one of the most useful and best centralized custodial exchanges that we have. And you still have a risk, right? It is a centralized custodial exchange, but so far Kraken did not get hacked, as far as I know. Right, so they are good custodians, and they actually take care of your money. So they are one of the centralized exchanges, one of the few that I can recommend to those that really need to have such a service. We're getting some background again from Thomas.
That's the trial software expiring. Great job, trial software. Really get it. It says right there, it's like, pay us $100 now, or we're gonna play noise over your audio.
Really?
that was a quick trial, guys.
That is fantastic. Well, good software, good software.
I
Well,
don't know.
but yeah, futures are really important. They actually are because they are first of all used as a hedge, right? So when you realize, like back in December 2017, prices at 20,000, and you know this is overbought and it's likely to crash, well, then you can hedge your position by going short on a future, by basically saying that I'm selling today, but I have to deliver it tomorrow. But we'll do that on a longer time horizon. And you can sell today at the price of 20,000, but then deliver at the price of 5,000 or 10,000, depending on what the price is. So when you did a short future, and now, of course, when the price was really high, that was a good move. And that helped you to secure some of your wealth. Really important. And futures are especially used by those that earn their income in Bitcoin. Right, for example, miners, they are the most one of the largest users of futures because they have regular income in Bitcoin, but they have expenditures in fiat, most likely for rent and electricity and all that. So therefore, futures are really used for entrepreneurs and also to discover the true price of Bitcoin. Most of the price discovery is actually here done by futures. So futures are important. They're a great financial tool. And it's good to see that a good custodial exchange such as Kraken is going to advance their portfolio and provide more services to their customers. That's awesome.
I think one thing that may put a bit of a spanner in the works, though, is because it's a British company, right? Or it's registered in the UK. So I wonder how the Brexit situation will affect that. If at the moment it is licensed to deal in Europe, and then Brexit happens, will that complicate things? I don't know, but it's one to watch.
Certainly, Brexit will complicate everything. If you have a deal with Europe, now you don't have a deal with Bitcoin, with anything anymore. You don't have a deal with Britain. You have to make a brand new deal. So yeah, definitely an issue there. But we'll have to keep an eye on Kraken. It's always good to have some good news for Bitcoin to start off the morning. But we also have bad news. We say many times how Bitcoin is adult money and you have to hold on to your private keys. We never thought it would come to something like this. For an exchange not to have any kind of control over their cold storage, to have it all in one person, and that one person to be sick. This is Gerald Cotton, CEO, former CEO of Quadriga CX. He passed away allegedly on December 9th due to complications from Crohn's disease. I don't know very much about Crohn's disease, but it does sound like he knew that he had it, and that he should have, at least given the keys to his wife, at least given the keys to his partner, at least had one other person in the company that was trusted with the keys. But the story that we're getting right now, the official story from Quadriga, is that more than $190 million in Bitcoin and other altcoins, etc., cannot be accessed because this guy didn't think that he would ever die. What do you got? And there's also more drama with the possibility that they never had $100 million. And the possibility that some or maybe all of the money from Quadriga is moving when they say that it's permanently locked in cold storage. Dan, what do you think about this interesting Bitcoin exchange story?
Well, I mean, if it is true that he died and didn't pass on the keys, that's terrible contingency planning for as a company, and a great example of what key man dependency or key person dependency. There should have been at least some backup, some splitting of the private keys, anything but just one person having them. There are rumors that a few people have kind of speculated that a death certificate is the new exit scam. And I think
especially in India, right?
Exactly, yeah.
What is he doing over there? Yeah.
Pretty easy to probably convince a doctor for not much to sign your death certificate. There are people calling to see the body, which is interesting. They literally want to see proof. They want to see his lifeless, mound.
POD, proof of death. Proof of death.
Oh, geez. Yeah, but it definitely, it's an interesting case, and I'll be I'll be curious to see how this this news this investigation happens as well. What methods they will use to actually try and prove that he has passed away. I don't know. Yeah, I think there's definitely it's something that hasn't happened before, and such a huge amount of money, and there's definitely going to be repercussions coming out of this.
Well, the main thing I don't like about this story is it makes Bitcoin look bad. Everyone's like, oh, it's so easy to get hacked. It's so easy to get lost. It's all these kind of things. That's what I don't like. And then people just paint the whole Bitcoin with that brush. What do you think, Max? Is it time to go through the streets banging a gong? Bring out your dead. Bring out your dead.
Yes, we have to do that, but don't use a gong. Use Bitcoin, right? Use somehow your paper, not your paper backup, but your metal backup, right? Your crypto steel, and use that to back. That's what's gonna pull out the dead, of course. Well, but here again, right? We just said that Kraken did not lose any money. Well, this centralized exchange, custodial exchange, did lose money. So again, not your keys, not your coins, not your responsibility, not your sovereignty, right? And especially not your privacy as well. So when you do give away your control over your money, well, make sure that at least they have some decency. Because seriously, if you do not have proper backups of your cold storage of your customers' money, fuck you. I mean, sorry, that's just the only way. I mean, this is unacceptable, of not having any backups of someone else's money in cold storage. I mean, if you have some money here on your phone, right, and you spend that on your road, and it's maybe $20 worth. Okay, you can live without a backup, but it's your money and it's not much. But if it's not your money and if it is a lot, well, you better be damn secure and really, really certain that you have all the backups. And yes, this can be difficult, of course, because complexity also increases security. That's just per definition. But then this also means that you have to be skillful. And I would argue that when I have such a custodial exchange, I want to have a service provider that actually knows what he's doing. Right? Then further, though, it is really important here then to mention also Pamela Morgan, who has written this fantastic book on crypto asset inheritance planning. And Andreas Antonopoulos is also involved in somewhat here. Mm-hmm. And it's really important, right? Because not your keys, not your Bitcoin. And, well, your children, unfortunately, do not have your keys. So it's not going to be their Bitcoin. And unfortunately, we will all die. Well, fortunately, we will all die eventually. And this means that we have to do the planning now, today. And it's really important. So I can highly suggest you reading this book here and actually making yourself some thoughts on how you handle this. Tell your family and your loved ones and your close friends, first of all, that you have Bitcoin, where you store them, and then where they can get it when they act or when something happens to you. This is really nothing to joke about. And again, it's your money and you have full responsibility over it.
Well, and that's just planning for a home, for, normal wills and stuff, for a company not to have a plan. Obviously, this guy's sick. I don't know why he's in India. In my mind, it's a man in the moon situation. He's looking for a special cure. They have crystals over there. They're going to heal him. I don't know why he's in India, but they need to have a backup. The second in command needs to come in and say, sir, what happens if your disease gets worse? What happens if you pass? His wife as well. I understand you don't trust anyone, that, yes, certainly if you had access to these private keys, you could run off with all the money. But you've got to trust someone. The key word here is irresponsible. This is an irresponsible business. They did a bad thing. I don't know where this guy went to business school, et cetera, et cetera. But that's who I think we need to be blaming on this, not Bitcoin. Other good tweets, I've seen some tweets where a guy said something like, if all of the gold was locked up under the ground, would you blame the gold? They lost the key to the gold vault. Now, this is a human error. It's not a Bitcoin problem, but unfortunately, it's being painted as one. It is an interesting story, though, to see it develop with all of the various, conspiratorial threads. Is the money moving? I hear yes. Is the guy really dead? I don't know. I
haven't seen anyone link to an address yet.
They had links on. I don't have it open now, but there was a Reddit post that said that some of the Litecoin was moving. So once again, do we really know it's their Litecoin? Could it be friends and family? Could it be someone else? Maybe even the company has gotten control of some of it, and then of course they would move it before they'd write a press release. So that's pretty reasonable. You can't expect a press release the first second that they find some keys. But it is a developing story. The other part of it, like the researcher said, he could only find 28 million. So everyone's been talking about rehypothecation, a fancy word for meaning pretending that you have more Bitcoin than you do. You have like 20 Bitcoin in deposit, you pretend you have 100, stuff like that. Maybe you had 20 in deposit, but you sent 10 of them out on loans or something. So if somebody wants their 20 back, you don't have it. That kind of thing could have been happening. A Ponzi scheme type thing could have been happening, taking in new money to pay the old money. A lot of these things, all the old scams are back, especially we've seen all these ICOs, all these other things. But yes, another kind of a black eye for Bitcoin. But
however, someone did say that the money is locked in, and that's actually good. That's a good sign that Bitcoin's working. You know, you can't get into someone else's address if you don't have the private key. So it's kind of terrible, and it's obviously bad that people have lost money. If we take I won't say the exact words, but after the interview with I can't remember, David Silver, I think it is, the lawyer. He said, don't keep your crypto on an exchange. That was in reference to BitGrail, I think. But it's a sad state of affairs. But unfortunately, it kind of proves a few things, which is one, that if you don't have the private key, you're not going to get in. Two, exchanges carry third-party risk, and unfortunately, you could lose your crypto if the exchange gets hacked or is compromised in some way, or the owner dies. But what will be interesting is will there be any opening up in terms of transparency of other exchanges and their security process? And I know that Coinbase, did a piece on their electromagnetic tents, and I'm wondering whether the other exchanges will try and prove their security in some way in order to gain the trust from their customers.
I did see someone on Twitter, it might have been Peter Todd, said something like, if we had proof of reserves, this wouldn't even be a problem. If Quadriga had just labeled this cold storage, that cold storage, then we know where it is. If it moves or it doesn't move, we know either way. And then as far as this other thing, it just comes back to a bad business structure, questionable company, and all these other companies. At this point, sure, I would love proof of reserves, but I also want now a line of succession. I need to know who is in charge of the company, like Kraken. Jesse Powell's the CEO, good guy. I know him from college and stuff. So maybe there's somebody under him, somebody under him, so on. I need to know who has access to their cold storage in case something bad happens to the CEO, et cetera, et cetera. Companies now have to kind of prove this. This can't be just trusted. Another story from the conference, like Dan was referencing, we talked to Tyler Jenks, and he was from the old finance industry. He's into, economics and hyperwaves and all these things. He kind of trusted Mt. Gox. I don't know the full story. Leah told me part of it, but I think he had a large loss in Mt. Gox because in his world, an exchange like, let's say, E-Trade is pretty bulletproof. You really don't, like, if I have money in E-Trade and I have a good password or whatever, I'm kind of set. The company's not going to run off with it. The servers aren't going to lose it. They're not going to go Mt. Gox. But in this crazy new Bitcoin world, a company like that could go Mt. Gox. And then now this Quadriga X thing, as well as all the other exchange hacks that we've covered throughout the year. So once again, that proof of keys day looks like another smart thing. I heard there were some people on Twitter were telling me they got their money off Quadriga because of proof of keys day. So it did do some good out there. We were questioning it. It still, might be unsafe or whatever, but no, I think it was good and interesting thing to happen after that. What do you think, Max? Anything to close this topic off?
Yes, right. Proof of keys here was really in that regard successful, because it really shows that we're right in that, right? If it's not your keys, it's not your Bitcoin. And then a great point that you bring up with the inheritance plan of the custodial exchanges, and that should definitely be added as well. But I would also focus here on the Voltoro glass books. Voltoro, a great gold to Bitcoin exchange from a good friend of the WCN, Josh, yes. And you see here exactly how much gold to the gram is in there and how many Bitcoin to the Satoshi. right? And not just in total, you also see exactly that this ID, this is one specific client, here has 800 grams of gold, or this one here has 3 kilograms of gold and 1 Satoshi. That's a precious Satoshi right here. And right, that's how exchange should look like. I want to see, okay, this is my idea, and I personally would know my blockchain address for this personal idea, and then I can be certain that the money that I have is actually in there, right? And that's something that truly is great, and I applaud Josh for doing this. Because it really shows that it can be done, especially with Bitcoin. He could even sign with the private key here to authoritatively and cryptographically prove that he has these keys. So Voltoro here, a great example of how it should be done.
And we really should demand more from these exchanges. We talked about ideas like proof of reserves back in the day, but lately I think everyone just got into, we want the latest altcoin, we want the latest ICO. That's what makes a great exchange. The exchange that has the most coins is the best exchange. And I'm not sure that's so. I think that the secure exchange, the transparent exchange, is the best exchange. Let's move on to the next topic. Twitter CEO to Joe Rogan. I think the currency of the internet will be Bitcoin. Of course, we've been saying this for a long time, but he's the CEO of Twitter, so now it really means something. I've listened to just a segment of the interview. I haven't gotten a chance to listen to the whole thing. I'm sure it's going to be great. Big fan of Joe Rogan, done some amazing interviews, and I like his long form style. But what do you guys think of Jack and his love for Bitcoin, especially the part where he says Cash App isn't working with any altcoins, and at the moment, we don't plan to? Dan.
Well, I think it's good that someone who is in a big position, or in terms of, I suppose, power, because having one of the biggest social media networks on earth puts you in a pretty powerful position, and for them to acknowledge that Bitcoin, take it seriously, and even say that they think that it's going to be the currency of the internet, I think that's obviously very positive. People probably respect him from in terms of politics. People in regulatory positions, because of the empire that he's built with Twitter. And so, if they take his opinion as in good faith and trust him, then they will perhaps have a better opinion of Bitcoin. I mean, I haven't seen the whole clip as well. I've heard that it got a load of a bit of negative feedback as well, because people weren't grilling him so much about other stuff. But I was really only interested in the Bitcoin.
Yeah, we can talk more about the other stuff after we do the Bitcoin. Let's go to Max.
Yes, I mean, Cash App here really does good stuff with Bitcoin, right? They don't have shitcoins. It's not confusing. It's super easy. 2 clicks and you're registered. Yes, KYC, but well, can't do that in a centralized company. You just can't get around that. But then, really easy to do it. And on the other hand, right, a couple months ago, Square, the company behind the Cash App, they open sourced the Sub-Zero cold storage solution. And this is actually really good. It's actually really legit. So they know how to keep your Bitcoin safe. At least they have a good protocol that is public, that is open source, that is audited and peer reviewed. So hopefully something like the earlier news here of losing funds cannot happen here with Square. Well, let's hope so. So definitely that is a great move forward, and the Cash App is fantastic for this. And I'm also really curious to see how Twitter could integrate Bitcoin. It would be nice to maybe see that there's a super like or something that promotes the tweet even further for a couple Satoshis. And any of your audience can then like, retweet, and I don't know, make super lightning stuff so that your tweet gets even further reach. Or maybe just tipping, right? Tipping with Lightning Network is quite nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I can report insider information that Twitter did meet with ChangeTip back in the day. ChangeTip was a little Twitter tipping app, and they were on some other services as well. And they did meet with him. Nothing ever came of it. But they've been involved and interested in the Bitcoin space for a long time. So I think it's a really good thing. I also like what Jack said about the Cash App doesn't want you to buy crypto on your credit card, not because it's not easy, but because they don't want you to gamble with money that you'd have to pay back 30% interest. I thought that was very honest and very even kind for a company. Like, they could just take your money, they don't care. But he made that choice, presumably on the side of right there. Also, that he discourages day trading with the app. That if they see a pattern of profile of day trading, they don't like that. They're not looking to that. They had more of a digital gold style to it. And then the Cash App is, of course, for payments and things, kind of a Venmo competitor. But we also want to discuss the internet Twitter drama, because we don't want to leave you guys out in the cold. There's a lot of conservatives out there, or libertarians, and so on and so forth. But basically, Twitter has been accused of shadow banning. I personally don't know if this practice is real. I side more on the Occam's razor. I think Twitter has so many servers that they have server problems, and these server problems express themselves. People believe in shadow banning, but they were very upset with Joe Rogan on Twitter and other platforms because he wasn't confrontational with Jack about the alleged censorship. Remember, the shadow banning, they believe it targets conservatives. They've started a new network called Gab. Gab believes there's a lot of a lot of shadow banning, a lot of conspiracy. What do you guys think? Personally, Joe Rogan put out a response. I agree with what he said. He wanted it to be a nice conversational interview. He wasn't going for attack or anything like that, and that wasn't really his issue to bring this flag in for the shadow banning. What do you guys think? I'll go to Dan and then Max.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen or read about any specific news items, so I can't kind of provide any evidence, I suppose. And anecdotally, the only thing I know is that when the MAGA hat kid thing all spun off, I saw some pretty hardcore, like pretty much death threats and violence threats, and even not interviews, but news presenters, I think, from big news feeds saying, this guy should be punched in the face, this 16 or 17-year-old kid, and it does. It may, if that's true, and I did see, I actually looked at that tweet. But if all of these tweets are allowed to just kind of sit there without any action, I can see why people would be peed off, because obviously if you're right wing and right wing views are being conservative views are being sort of patted down and held back, and the left wing stuff maybe isn't. I'm doing this very delicately because I don't want to ruffle feathers, but that's going to piss a few people off. I think at the end of the day, it should be fair, and there should be a rule set, which is anything that promoting violence gets removed. Anything that promotes something that's bad, pedophilia, anything like that, there's just a straight across the board. Otherwise, the company's going to cause problems for itself reputationally, and it will see people move. Whether that's going to be significant enough to shift a lot of people, I don't know, but it's definitely ruffled a few feathers. The fact that there's odd treatment between the two sort of political sides.
It's also worth noting that Twitter's a private company, and free speech is something you have in the public square, not in a private company. I know people get upset about this and all these kind of things, but I've kind of been saying this the whole time. When we lost social networking to Facebook, when we lost short messages to Twitter, when we went away from having more open source Linux and Unix-based programs that serve everybody, like email, and we went towards Facebook email and Twitter short messages and these kind of things, we lost that control. So it's funny to see all these people wake up and to realize that, yes, Facebook, Twitter, these people have rules. We're not going to put up pictures of dead babies here on YouTube, whatever, these kind of things. So yes, there are rules, there are controls. There's also a little bit of a double standard why Jack hasn't banned President Trump, who's tried to start several wars, who's been bullying, who's been attacking people, who's been using slurs. All these kind of things are pretty clearly against the rules, but we don't see a ban coming down. I think that's one of those. It really having the president on the platform really does elevate Twitter. So he really can't do that one. What do you think, Max, about Jack and the alleged censorship issue?
Yes, Thomas, I actually agree with you to say that this is a question of private property, right? And who owns the server of Twitter? Well, it's not you. So they're not your servers. And you cannot tell them to do with these servers what you want. No. So they are in every right to kick everyone out of Twitter. They could close Twitter tomorrow. It would be a stupid business decision, but it's their property. They can do it. Now, that's a legal, ethical point of view. But then, I mean, you're still kind of an asshole, right? When you start throwing people out of your house when they do not deserve it. Right? So we need to have a nice, clear set of rules on when we actually start kicking people out of our houses, right? And here I watched or listened to the interview on the What Bitcoin Did podcast here with, what's his name? Andrew Torba, the CEO of Gap. And then we... Okay, yeah. And he said that they have a really easy and a really simple user agreement for when they will actually start kicking people out. And that is nice, right? When you have precise rules, okay, no aggressive or threats of physical violence, stuff like this. When this is clearly defined, what is okay and what is allowed in this house, right, on these servers, then I have no issue whatsoever that when you break these terms of service that you get kicked out. I would just really ask that these terms of service are transparent and that they are not changing all the time, right? So, I mean, I've never read the terms of service of Twitter. I've never got blocked on Twitter. So it's difficult, right? I personally am much more in favor for open conversation. And I do believe that when we start taking away the freedom of speech, even for those that have fringe opinions, when they can no longer express these fringe opinions, then they will start to become aggressive and get attention in some other ways. So conversation, to grow together, to learn together, is fundamentally important in any society. And taking that away is dangerous. So I'm very much in favor for precise rules on where the limits are in your own house, right, in your own server, and then act upon them. So yes, if Trump would literally threaten nuclear wars, I might be in favor of actually forcing him off this platform. But then on the other hand, it's much better that we know that Trump is threatening a nuclear weapons against other nations, right? It's tricky.
It is tricky, and I think we've opened the box of free speech here. I'm a big supporter of free speech, but I don't know. I mean, they've put limits on it, right? There's a couple of limits, like no yelling fire in a crowded theater, right? At first, I was like, no, we should have that. But now I'm much more reasonable, and I'm like, yeah, it's a public safety issue, that kind of thing. There's also free speech is one of those things where at first you're like, oh, it's going to be, Martin Luther King and speeches, and it's going to be all this kind of positive speech. But on the other side of it, there's 4chan, and there's hate speech, and there's trolling, and there's all these like dark sides to free speech. And of course, I'm one of those, the big decision by the ACLU versus I think it was the KKK that they had the right to march, stuff like that. When the ACLU defends Nazis, things like this. I'm generally in favor of that. We have to have that kind of divisive speech. We have to have those extreme ends of the speech so we can have a full discussion. Offensive things have to be discussed, all that kind of thing. But I think that we're going to see the same thing. And I want to bring in the Patreon issue here too, because they're also having an issue with Patreon, a right-wing or allegedly right-wing guy, I think Sargon of Akkad, something like that. He was banned from Patreon. This really pissed off Jordan Peterson, some of the other, I don't know what they're calling themselves. We need new labels for this. But the internet, I don't know, the internet talking right-wingy people, I don't know. They'll get mad at that. But I like Jordan Peterson. I read his book. He's a good guy. But he's basically quit Patreon, where he exposed by screenshot that he was getting $30,000 a month from Patreon. That's like $360,000 a year. That's a lot of money that he just gave up. And I'm sure he'll be fine and all those things. But they're starting a new Patreon. And I want to ask you guys, do you think that they're going to start kind of a right-wing Patreon, and then the right-wing Patreon will start kicking people off and have the same problem again? And then to contrast that with Gab, where Gab, I guess you have your own servers, so it's server-based. They're not all linked together yet. I don't know their architecture plans. But Gab is one of those where it's going to have the dark speech, the 4chan, etc. gets in there. Will that bring it down? If they had one of these right-wing Patreons, would they get taken down by all this dark speech, or would they start banning left-wing speech Are we really going to make like a neutral platform? Because remember, the original internet, neutral platform, anyone can send packets, right? That's what we agree on. We agree on the sending of packets. Packets full of Nazi speech, packets full of child pornography, packets full of real pornography, other pornography. I don't know, all these things, packets. So that's where it gets more complicated, is when you can see inside the packet, then you have to make a choice whether that's acceptable on your network. And now we're talking about acceptable networks. So I think there's a lot here. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, it's a good point about the fact that it's a private company and they can do what they like. The only thing, because it's a private company, it's the market decides, and if they piss off enough people, then eventually that could damage them. I'm not sure, just from the recent events that there's a significant people leave, a portion of people leaving. But I kind of think that, like you said about you can't yell fire in a theatre. It's a general, it's a safety issue, and you should, in theory, with free speech, be able to say what you like. You should be able to say bomb in a theatre if you want, but it's ludicrous, and it would probably hurt a few people, stampeding out, etc. So there are definitely limitations, but where do you draw the line? And I think that if you shut down, if you shut down discussion goes underground, and discussion goes crazy. Sorry.
Sure, your dogs are discussing as well.
The dogs have shut down discussion.
They don't believe in
Censor them. Shut them down.
Well, and that's what I had to do there. See, and again, now the evil administrator has muted Crypto Raptor because he's thinking about people with headphones on. And then the people that don't have headphones on, they're like, oh, I had no problem with those dogs. You were wrong to mute them. And then I'm a big censorship thing. So you see how it happens really fast. Also, I only had a split second to decide whether or not to mute the dogs. And again, you have to, I think at the end, to go back to that Dalai Lama quote that we started with, these people are just humans. The people at Twitter are human. The people at Gab are human. Patreon, Jordan Peterson, all these people are just humans. I think maybe if we could get together on a call like this kind of call here and discuss just our views, not that we'd change our views or that we'd come to agreement right away, but I think we'd see everyone's side of this. Twitter has a side, other people have a side. All these things. But I want to give a shout out to everyone in the audience. We're up to about 70 viewers, which is really good for this time of morning. Give us a thumbs up and a share down below, and then everyone's going to paste the Skype thing into the chat at the same time. So Jinx on Max, you owe me a Coke. And you can Skype us now at World Crypto Network, all one word, or 1-518-600-1949. You don't have to have all of the answers. You don't have to know everything about free speech and be quoting the George Carlin case to us or anything like that. But we'd like to hear from you. And also, I'd love to just test the phone call to see if they work. I set it up on my laptop today instead of my server, and I'm hoping that's going to work. I paid $100 to this loopback company, and they kind of terrorist me for that software. But still, hopefully they make a good product, and you guys can give us a call. That'd be fun.
Oh yeah, we have here in the chat a really great thing from Space Jockey. He's saying people want their rights without the intrinsic responsibility that come with them, and that's perfect, right? We want to have freedom. Well, but when we act as free sovereign individuals, we'll have to live with the consequences of our actions. In any case, we cannot push this responsibility away. It is impossible. We can try to, but we will fail. You are responsible for your own actions. And that includes, of course, right, yelling fire in a crowded theater. Well, what is right here, the libertarian approach to this? I highly recommend a book by Walter Block, Defending the Undefendable. And his great argument here, the 2-volume series, is that basically, if you yell fire in a crowded theater, you do not have this right if it's not your theater. The owner of the theater could say now, hey, okay, so you yelled fire in my theater. All of my guests ran out. Maybe some people got hurt. I lost money because now chairs are broken or whatever. Then he who yelled fire in his theater is liable for this. Now, on the other hand, if it's your theater, you can yell fire as much as you want, right? Well, again, it might be something if someone actually gets hurt by this, then that's again another issue. But in general, right, it's again property rights, and as long as you're not stealing from someone, your act is morally righteous. But it's tricky, huh?
Sorry, I was waiting till you finished. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh well, I just suddenly thought. Sorry, I just suddenly thought in my head. Is there an equivalence here with I know there's been certain situations where for some reason it's always cake makers. Like cake makers are like, oh, you know, can't have a gay cake or whatever, and there's court cases to say that you can or you can't. Surely that applies to Twitter as well, right? You can't kind of, if you know, they can't ban people based on politics. If they say that a cake company has to bake a cake that has a gay message on there, then surely the same rule would apply to Twitter or something else. You can't choose your customers based on their politics, right?
Well, that's part of the issue, and I think that's what's being discussed here is this question of whether you have to serve your customers or not, or where do your rights end. I think Dan and I were just listening to that great George Carlin bit in the car, and George was talking about, I believe that I have the right to do anything that I want. Oh, there we go. How about that? Oh, use the microphone. Okay, allow. All right. I allowed it. Hello, caller. You're live on the World Crypto Network. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, Thomas. How's it going, bud?
Woo! Phone calls work. All right. What's your name and where are you calling from?
I'm Chris. I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania.
All right, Chris. What's on your mind about Bitcoin or whatever we were talking about today?
Well, I was thinking that, the censorship on Twitter and stuff like that, if they allow that to continue, then where's it going to stop? Will they like, oh, well, we need to make a change to Bitcoin where, oh, no, this guy can't send here or this guy can't send there. I mean, it seems like a slippery slope. I know that may be a bit of a far stretch, but, that's kind of my thoughts on it, and don't really like all the censorship on Twitter, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's not good, but I don't know if they could change Bitcoin. Part of the beauty of Bitcoin, and I was talking to Peter Todd about this, and he said that it costs a lot to change the rules of the ledger. So it would be a very big deal if they were able to change Bitcoin to block this address or block that address. But of course, a company like Coinbase, they could say they're not going to take this from an address. They're not going to take that from an address. So there can be different types of censorship. But also with Twitter, I think it'll stop when it hurts their bottom line. If people, okay, so I don't know if the shadow banning's real. Let's put that to the side. But if there were enough of these conservative, or for lack of a better term, conservative people that were upset that Twitter would change. But I think Twitter is more like Instagram or something like that. I don't know that it's so dependent on one group that they would be willing to change their policies, even if they were exposed. Even if there was let's say an admin from Twitter quits his job, starts saying blah blah blah, we've been shadow banning all these things, and it was exposed. I think that might see a kind of a right-wing, left-wing alliance of people who support free speech and don't like this censorship. But falling less of that, I think Twitter's just going to keep going and just keep it quiet.
It's a private company, so they can do what they want. That really kind of is the bottom line, I suppose.
I think so. What do you guys think, Max, Dan?
Yeah, I don't know if we can say that they are a private company, therefore they can do anything, right? They have to live, again, with the consequences of their actions. And when we see that Twitter is going to censor more and more, then we, as the users, have the power to get out. Right?
They have to live, again, with the consequences.
Oh, okay, I hear myself.
Sorry, you're echoing, caller.
Do you have headphones?
Better?
Yes, perfect. Okay, thank you.
All right, better.
So yes, we have absolutely
the other guys talking. That's why I turned up my volume slightly.
That's fine. Go ahead, Max.
So yes, we as the users, we have the opportunity here of saying no, of walking away. Right? That's what many people did, for example, with Facebook. Right? Many people no longer use Facebook, well, because it sucks. Can Facebook do anything against that? Well, they can improve their service, right? And then out of this action, the consequence would be that their user base would increase. but ultimately it's up to us, and that's the good thing, right? That's the beauty of a private company, that they have skin in the game, right? When they mess up, they have to live with the consequences.
Yeah, I think the private company things are interesting, and it's a very good point that they can decide, and then the market will decide. But I suppose one thing that's
about your software, Thomas, I can hear you talking, but I can't hear any of the other guys talking.
That's interesting. I wonder why you can't hear the other guys. That previously worked. Huh. Very odd. Why would
I tried to pick a spot where they were not talking.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know why that is, but we'll work on it. We'll get it fixed. I also wanted to mention that corporations originally chartered by the Dutch to serve the state. They were to serve a purpose, like the Dutch East India Corporation was designed to open new trade routes to India for the good of the Netherlands. So there is some idea of corporations having a public responsibility. I know you guys don't like Michael Moore, but I heard Michael Moore talking about the Starbucks CEO, and he's talking about he's a self-made man and he made all his money himself. But really, he's using water from the city to sell you coffee. He's using streets and sidewalks of the city to get you to his shop. He depends a lot on the public infrastructure that supports his business. And Twitter, with the internet, with the phones, with the computers, with all the ways that we access Twitter, is no different. So I do think even if companies aren't chartered to serve the public anymore, there is some kind of a connection to the public. And as much as you might not like it, government could put some kind of a control on Twitter, could put some kind of a control on Facebook, and could even charge Starbucks more for those water, things like that. So what do you think, caller? We'll just one more comment and then we'll let you go.
I mean, I'm sure Starbucks pays a wheelbarrow full of taxes every year, every month, or whatever. I mean, that might be kind of a tough argument to make. I pay taxes. I'm sure everyone pays taxes for the water, for the streets, for the police, for everything. I mean, I think that might be a tough argument to make with some folks.
Well, we'll have to see how it goes, and we'll have to keep an eye on this Twitter situation. Thanks so much for the call. Sorry that you can't hear the other people. We'll keep experimenting with that.
No worries, man. Keep it rolling, bud.
All right. And you can call us now on Skype at World Crypto Network, all one word, or at 518-600-1949. Apparently you can hear me, but no one else, which is really, really odd. But we'll work with that. We're getting into some good issues here on censorship. Jeremy says we should end public water and privatize all water. I just think it's an important thing to think, because everyone wants to say, oh, he's a self-made man, or oh, that company did so well, or especially they were talking about prescription drug programs and the way that we fund the research for the company, then the company creates the pill, then the people don't get anything for funding the research. The company continues to charge for the pill. That idea that the people are paying for the research, that the people should get some benefit from the pill, that the people are paying for Starbucks water and they should get some benefit for Starbucks selling all that water, running it through the coffee grinds. At the very least, not necessarily a benefit. At the very least, he could say thank you. He could say, like, yeah, thanks to the government, thanks to the water. Like, if you imagine if Starbucks came into a place where there was bad water, what would they do? It would cost more for their business. If the city of New York was like, okay, tomorrow, no water for Starbucks, it would cost more for them to run their business. They're just like they're relying on, if you're a lawyer, you rely on FedEx, you rely on the postal office, you rely on people sending you mail, things like this, outside services. I just think everything's much more connected than people think. It's very difficult to say, I am the single one, I am the one who did it all by myself. All those kind of things. They also mentioned that the CEO of Starbucks lived in the projects, which he was using as a rags to riches story. But once again, the projects are government-supported housing, so the government gave him a hand up, and that's the point of government. That's what these systems are supposed to do when they work right. Yes, I know you guys hate all government, but Max, what do you think? Brought up a lot of issues there.
Well, definitely. Facebook or Starbucks or anyone, they really rely on a lot of other individuals. And there is a phenomenal, really short essay called I Pencil by Leonard E. Reed, a great economist. And it basically starts, I am lead pencil, the ordinary wooden pencil familiar to all boys and girls and adults who can read and write. Writing is both my vocation and my avocation. That's all that I do. And basically, the story here is that nobody ever knows exactly how to produce even such a simple tool as this pencil. Why? Because, well, do you know how to cut down a tree, right? Do you know how to grow a tree? Do you know how to build an axe that cuts down the tree? Do you know how to grow the coffee that is then roasted and prepared for the woodcutter who cuts down the tree? Do you know how to build a ship that carries the coffee to the wood? Do you know how to cut down woods into small little pieces? Do you know how to build lead, how to build rubber? Do you know how to make the color coding to make it yellow? There are a billion and a billion, uncountless amounts of resources and skills here needed in order to build anything, right? It's just a matter of perspective. And now the question is, how can we make sure that although we need so many different goods and resources to make just the most simplest of utilities, like a pencil, how can we organize that? Well, as statism or socialism for that matter would be that we have some individuals dictating what to do with all these resources. So one person is saying, okay, now we are going to cut down 5 trees and we're going to carry them all over right here, and then we're going to get 10 kilograms of lead and make 5 grams of rubber or whatever. And one individual is going to plan everything. It's impossible. Not just because there's a lack of information, but because you simply do not know where to allocate these scarce resources, right? And then on the other hand, we have a free market economy where out of incentives of profit and loss, free individuals as entrepreneurs allocate their resources that they have homesteaded or exchanged for in accordance to their own individual preference. And it just happens that out of this, let's say, spontaneous order arises that all these individuals, without needing to communicate directly, they still end up producing all the goods and services that are needed to build such a tool like a pencil. So this is very similar to a Schelling point in Bitcoin, for example. We have a similar Schelling point here on which resources we need in order to build this pencil. So yes, absolutely. We all rely on billions of individuals to provide us with all the goods and services that we need in order to survive. And well, the question is, how can we make sure that we do not waste resources? And well, I would say that freedom is quite a good system of making sure that we do not waste resources. Because when you start wasting resources, again, you have to live with the consequences. And as a free individual, this means that you will have less resources, which is somewhat of a form of a punishment, right? You have less stuff to remove the uneasiness with. So you are incentivized to be efficient in your economic calculation.
Now, I think this is going to upset you, Max, but I think that previously we organized the society on capitalism, right? The Soviets failed, whatever, all that. So we're like, okay, let's have a race. Who can build the best pencil? Who can build the cheapest pencil? Who can build a combination of the best and the cheapest pencil, so on and so forth, all that kind of thing. But the problem is that capitalism is wasteful, right? That we built 1,000 pencils that we didn't need, and that we tore down a forest and we have to rebuild a forest now to get more pencils and all these kind of things. And that we're on a limited planet. We have a limited number of resources. It's a closed system, right? So the question is capitalism going to destroy our closed system, or are we going to have to change capitalism so that it doesn't do it? The problem is that, you know, capitalism is this, the GDP must always rise. You have to always make more money to pay off the previous money, but we're in a closed system, so the GDP can't always rise. There's only a certain number of trees. We can only make a certain number of pencils. Then there are no more trees. Are we going to have to change our society, or are we going to destroy things? Like, are we going to go back to a Middle Ages? And I don't think we can really answer this, and I don't think we have the perfect terms or anything here, but this is kind of the larger scale discussion that all of society is having. Everything's getting interconnected, right? We're getting all this internet. We're talking to Max in Germany, Dan's in England, I'm in Las Vegas. Everyone's watching at home. The guy called in, all this stuff. We're all connected now. But are we going to use this connectivity to make better decisions? Is this going to allow us to horrify you guys, maybe perfect socialism? a computer-controlled socialism. All of the various decisions that the Politburo couldn't make or made for their own human interest, etc., would be made by an caring, incalculable artificial intelligence that doesn't care and just tries to get the best outcomes for people, which again, of course, Star Trek, they had many episodes destroying those artificial intelligences. What do you think, Max? This is probably the challenge of our times.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's a challenge of all times, right? We live in a scarce world. Right? When I hold this mouse right here, you cannot have it. It's mine. We need property rights for that, right? Because there's only one person can control it. And I do agree that, of course, with capitalism as well, there is waste. Yes, for sure. In any system, there is waste. The question is, what happens to you when you are wasteful? In a capitalist free market society, well, you don't have the things anymore, right? And there's no way of you getting it back. When you burn your house down, it's gone and you have to build it back up again. And these costs that you have to carry incentivize you not to be wasteful. Now, on the other hand, here with a statist economy, the politicians, they are wasteful as well as anyone is. But what happens to them? Well, they do not really have to live with the consequences because they do not have skin in the game. They did not have to pay for these resources. They did not have to build it. And when they destroy it, they do not have to rebuild it and live with these consequences.
All right. And Dan, a little comment on the future of civilization, capitalism versus conservatism, scarcity, environment.
My headphones have, yeah, my mic's working, isn't it? Sorry, headphones cut out a bit quickly. Well, I don't, you know, someone made a good point that, like, you know, if we as a society, you know, we can reduce waste where it's necessary, but technically entertainment, you know, is kind of waste. There's a lot of things where you could consider them as waste, but we wouldn't want to get rid of them just because of the fact that we're trying to reduce waste. So there's kind of, I think there's like allowable waste. And on that subject, going back to a report that was done a while back, a mining report by Bitcoin mining report by CoinShares.
Censor them, shut them down.
Tell your dogs. I think it's the amount of electricity that Bitcoin uses is less than all the consoles, or the main consoles, you know, the Xboxes, the Nintendo Wii's and Wii U's, and the PlayStations being on for 4 hours a day, an average of 4 hours a day. So, you know, you could argue that, well, Bitcoin's wasteful, but then, you know, if these consoles are eating more electricity, that's more wasteful because Bitcoin's providing a service rather than a you know, just a bit of entertainment, which arguably is kind of not necessary for human life, if you're that boring. But going back, one thing that I thought was pretty cool when we were at a service station in the US, it was Death Valley, I think, in between Nevada and California, and Los Angeles. And I saw for the first time ever, and it reminded me straight away, Spaceballs, the movie. Cans of oxygen, absolutely amazing. And
wow.
So that just pops into my head on the water discussion. So yeah, I mean, is that waste, a can of oxygen? I mean, like, that's pretty crazy. There's enough of it around us. But yeah, I don't know. Waste is a difficult thing because one man's trash is another man's, but one person's trash is another person's treasure, and one person's waste is another person's leisure.
And
Yes,
it is
pretty
interesting. They're talking in the chat, should we ban all entertainment? And I've certainly heard this argument before when I read Ralph Nader's books, and I used to listen to Ralph Nader. He was very much against sports. He would talk about how everyone's memorizing all these baseball statistics and, oh, yesterday's score and this player and that player and all their names, and that it was kind of a waste. And for a long time, I agreed with Ralph, and I ignored sports, and I was completely sportsless. But then I was interested in more. So I went more, and I got into sports as a way to talk to other people that I don't have anything in common with, kind of like sports or the weather. Like the Super Bowl yesterday, I watched it, or the basketball finals, you know, I watched it. I spend a little bit of my time. And I think that's where it comes in, is moderation. Entertainment's okay. I like movies. Sometimes I watch movies all day, but generally, you know, one movie a day. or one movie a week, something like this. Or read your book, but don't read your book all day. Get outside, get away from the computer, do some programming, but get a couple hours out in the sun. I think that it's the moderation that we need, and especially with the internet, with these phones and these tablets and the screen time and everything, we're addicted. And part of it is that we're addicted because we're addictive type of people, and because humans and dogs and animals and all these things get addicted. But also, I think it's because these apps are designed to addict us, that Facebook, other people, that they're using psychological research and dopamine rewards and little red envelopes and little like buttons and thumbs up and all these things. So we are being manipulated. And what we have to do is take a step back from it, where we can, think without being manipulated. We can put the phone down for a minute. It's very difficult. Everyone know where their phone is? I lost mine. Oh, here it is. It's right here. Okay, we're all good. Got the phone. But we could put it down for a second, and we could think about how we want to use it. But that comes into everything with these controls. If screen time becomes mandatory and it could shut me out and I can't go around it, then it's a control. If I want to watch movies all day and the phone won't let me, or Netflix won't let me, or whatever, it's a control. So we have to say, like fire in a crowded theater, which ones of these controls are we okay with? Which ones of these are not okay with? And then with computers, you can break them and you can get around any control. So I think we have a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions and not a lot of answers here. So let's move on to the next issue, probably the last issue for today. And maybe we'll get some phone calls. We'll do some phone calls here. But I want to talk about Lynn Albright and Ross Albright, the alleged Dread Pirate Roberts. She's put all of her hopes into President Trump pardoning Ross Albright. What do you guys think? There's different ways to look at this. Obviously, a very sad story. I met Lynn once years ago at PorkFest. She's a very nice lady. I don't think she understands, or at the time she was still kind of in shock, dealing with what's happened to her son and what he was secretly doing that she didn't know about, or allegedly doing, so on and so forth. But it's a very sad story. He's in jail for multiple consecutive life sentences. He's kind of a libertarian character. He just wanted to run an open market. Of course, that embarrassed the government and embarrassed all of the drug enforcement agencies, so on and so forth. They use this as a negative thing. They say that, oh, he was a murderer when he wasn't. They also say there was, negative consequences. People chose to take drugs. They got sick. Some of them died. But they did make their own personal choice to do that. That's a big gray issue. In actual reality, remember, the website was used for large amounts of cannabis, for large amounts of cash, with no violence. So the website in some ways decreased violence, in other ways made drugs accessible. Certainly it broke the law. That's the law issue. But what do you guys think of this? Do they have a shot? I think I was going to say, unfortunately, Ross is probably going to have to spend quite a lot of time in jail before the drug war idea completely goes out of our society. All the people who supported it, pretty much, as much as this is dark to say, they have to get old and die. The people that believe in the drug war have to leave our society. Then the young people who presumably don't believe in the drug war rise up, and then we could see a pardon that would be socially acceptable. If Trump did it now, it would be like an out of left field pardon, which is not completely unusual for him. He's a very uncertain, unknown president. We don't know what he's going to do next. I don't think so. That's the real only hope for this pardon, is that he's so random that he pardons him. What do you think? We'll go to Dan and then Max.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think that the drug war is just absolutely it's freaking absurd. I mean, it's crazy. It's unconstructive. You think about the amount of resources that are required, in every area, from customs to policing to the legal cases against drugs, and countries like is it Portugal? It's Portugal. Have turned it into a health issue, and that's actually brought death rates and addiction rates down. So why aren't we learning from those lessons? I think the US has been. I was really quite happy when I went over there, and they had loads of weed dispensaries. I thought that was really cool. And the UK is probably about 20 years behind that because of people with top hats and old school ideas. And that marijuana can't be good in this place. You know, I don't think it's going to change anytime soon.
Did you see that recent report by the WHO, the World Health Organization? They recently said that marijuana should be moved out of Schedule 1 and into a lower schedule. And that basically was an admission that for the last 50 years, they've been wrong, which is very difficult for people to say, like that they were wrong for 50 years. And to make up for that wrong, we have to stop being wrong. So.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's got to change a lot of hearts and minds. So if you think that the police who have been policing, you know, what's the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency in the US? You know, these people have like lived their lives, you know, hating drugs. They're like, oh, drugs, oh, and you know, those people have got, you know, that's a huge mindset to suddenly go, nah, the drugs are fine. So I think there's a lot of it's the social aspects as well. But certainly that it wasn't just the drugs on Silk Road. I can't remember. I'm sure I went there just to check it out at one point, and there was other things that you could buy on there that were maybe a little bit more sinister. So the drug argument kind of works, and I agree with that. But when you take into account the other things that are available on there, unfortunately, you know, that makes the case a lot worse. From what I've read up on it, he was stitched up quite a bit with these hits that weren't actually hits. But that's a tactic that I generally think's insane anyway, to kind of make up crazy stuff in order to put people into a situation. Because I know it's a silly example, but you only need to watch, like, was it Darren Brown, and like how he can convince people to do stuff, but just by conditioning them, by pressuring them. And also a series on false confessions in Netflix really shows that if you put enough pressure on someone, they will admit to anything, and they'll agree to anything. And when you've got like a force of people that's trying to convince someone to do a hit because they need to do it, for example, that shouldn't be classed as a crime. What should be classed as a crime is people being manipulated in that way in order to do something that they didn't instigate themselves. It's a different story if Ross was like, yeah, man, I need to fucking call a hit on these guys. And instead, from what I've read, it was them going to him going, oh, how about you call a hit on this dude? And that's a completely different scenario. I don't know. It's all a bit crazy to me, but
it does seem like they entrapped him. I think entrapment is what you're looking for there. And remember, like they said in the chat here, the agents that were investigating him were stealing from him and are now in jail. There was also some interesting stuff in the article about the guy who was allegedly killed was an agent. He was an FBI informant, and that he now supports Ross. He was always a good guy to Ross, and he's not afraid of Ross. He wants Ross out of jail, but that he was afraid of the agents. He was afraid of, I think, Bridges. He said he was scared of. He said he wasn't scared of Karl Mark Force the Third, or the Fourth, I think it is. Had the best name ever. Again, I can't wait for the movies. They're making movies on this for sure. But it is a sad story with Ross in jail, in the hole, probably forever. I agree with trying to read the chat here. CLV had a great comment. He said, people convicted of pot distribution in 2005 are 90% likely to get relief. By 2030, the political climate seemed destined to favor Albright's chances at relief. So there might be hope for this in the long term, but it's going to take a major societal change like we're talking about. People who support the drug war have to be removed from power, and that's just going to take time and age. Go ahead, Max.
Absolutely. What happened to Ross Ulbricht is a human tragedy, as we've rarely seen it. We have seen worse tragedies, but it is one of the greatest tragedies here in our times. And what has happened to him is absolutely wrong, immoral, and disgusting. It's tragic, really it is. And my heart goes out to all his friends, family, and loved ones who have been affected by this horribly immoral act. And well, it's a shame that the only solution that seems to be out of this conundrum is to appeal to the authority of Trump, which is absolute bullshit. It really is. This does not work, and it should not work. You know what we should do, what we have every single right to do, what in my opinion we must do, is we have to go into that prison, guns blazing, kill every single order-following piece of shit cop that is trying to defend here this immoral and wrong act. We have every single right to forcefully take Ross out of this shithole and back into freedom where he does belong. And anyone who stops us on this path is an immoral piece of shit order follower that does not deserve to live. Why? Because he is aggressing against the liberties of a peaceful individual who has not harmed a single soul. And with that act of aggressing against such a peaceful individual, you give up your right to live. And I'm not saying that lightheartedly. I mean it because it's the truth. And what has happened to Ross is a tragedy. And we should not tolerate this. We must not tolerate this. And we have to act upon it.
And that's of course theoretically. Theoretically, we're not encouraging any violence here. We're saying theoretically, in a theoretical level,
aggression.
We're not.
I'm not encouraging aggression, but I am encouraging very much defensive force against the face of aggressive violence that has been enacted. Yes, we have every single right to defend Ross Ulbricht and get him out of there. Every right.
Everybody in the chat's enjoying this. Remember, Max is in Germany, so he doesn't have to worry about the United States cracking down on him. But certainly we're not encouraging violence. Please don't go out there and do anything violent and say that we encourage this. But it is a good point there that Ross is being a political prisoner held against his will. It is a political issue if you think this drug market is worth punishing someone with 2 life sentences for. There's a lot going on here. And what's lawful, like Rad Vladdy's saying here in the chat, he says, lawful nowadays is the opposite of moral. So maybe it's moral that we would go there and ask Ross to be removed from prison. Maybe it would be even a peaceful protest, but it wouldn't be necessarily lawful. So they also say lawful doesn't mean righteous. That's probably true. And there was another great comment here where AR4, I'm going to mess it up. Forsagren, sorry. AR in the chat says, the movies might get him out. I hope they hurry. And it is true if the movies come down on the more social network side of thing. Ross is a geek. Ross is, just having a fun time on a website, not a bad guy, da-da-da. If the movies come down the other way with the hits and the gangsterism and these kind of things, and they show him in a negative way, it could be bad for him. But imagine a movie that tells his story, and at the end it says, Ross is serving a life sentence. You can help get him out. Go to this website. Something like that. I don't know that that's going to happen, not from Hollywood, but that's a good idea. Also, just in general, maybe humanizing the story if they show his family, if they show his mother and so forth. But I don't know that they'd focus on that for the movie. Movies, remember, are pretty sensational. They're going to focus on the big button issues, which are, the drugs, the money, the hits, the anonymity. Sadly, the kind of crazy, unhinged speeches that he gave over and over again. The interview that he gave on Christmas Eve with Kashmir Hill about how he'd never get caught and he'd never do all those kind of things and all that kind of thing. Jennifer has a good point in the chat. We need to make the movie then. That's an interesting idea. If we could raise some Bitcoin and we could make a movie about Ross Ulbricht, maybe a positive movie, maybe explain the story. Something like that's a cool idea. I remember when, gosh, it seems so long ago, it was just last year when the price of Bitcoin was up and looked like it was just going to go up forever. I started thinking about movies again. I started thinking about movies in law school. I was like, oh, now that we've got money and all these things, maybe I could, make movies, because I always wanted to make movies. I've watched a lot of movies, read a lot of books about movies. I'm into it. Also, law school will be fun. Yeah, no, let us know in the chat if you guys want us to make a movie. Yeah, we could reduce shares. ICO for Ross. Yeah, Wes Anderson. Whoa, that'd be a good movie. Ross in prison, folding his uniform, perfectly folded uniform. Ross is very OCD in the Wes Anderson version. But yeah, it might be Max is weighing the moral issues of running an ICO versus making a movie that might help get Ross out of prison. Interesting ideas. I think also the David Winter or that guy made a movie about Silk Road. There's been a couple of Silk Road movies that are interesting. What do you think, Max? Should we do an ICO for our Silk Road movie?
Is it okay to do an ICO for such a righteous cause as freeing Ross Ulbricht? Ah, man, ICOs are bad. Like I don't know. I would much prefer that we do a tally coin actually for Ross Ulbricht. Well, he has his donation address, right? So that was something which I would absolutely prefer.
Yeah, Jeremy's questioning. He's not sure if a movie would make Ross look good, show him knowing it was illegal to start. I think most of the movies I see, or the vision that I would see of this, is that it just gets out of control. That Ross has these cool libertarian ideas and he starts a website. And I remember previously, if you guys have read the articles about him, he had a website where he was selling books. And he had a warehouse and he was selling books from the warehouse. And this is where he got the skills basically to set up the Silk Road, where he was selling other things from other warehouses. But it was more participatory. So he was a little businessman. He was a little entrepreneur before that.
Yeah, the thing is though that whilst on the drug side, I do definitely think that that there's going to be a mindset change. But some of the other some of the other things that were being sold on there is going to make it a bit more difficult to swing people around. If it is based on just the drug side, I really think that it almost would be a null issue. But I think the reason why it hasn't got so much, as in there would be a huge case for him to be released. But because of the fact that there was a lot of other things for sale on there.
All right, Dan, you keep dancing around it. Other things. I know about raw milk. I know about probably political flyers, maybe the anarchist cookbook, some garbage like that. Where are we going? Are we going into the pedophilia? Were they selling that on Silk Road? Where are we going?
No, it's more.
What's the worst? What's the worst thing they could sell? I mean, heroin, that's bad. Extreme drugs, methamphetamines, things like this. These are certainly, we can mostly agree, bad.
Yeah, I think it's more general banned other substances. Like I heard there was like or like weapons, like explosives, stuff like that. Again, I swear I remember checking it out once, but I just can't remember what was on there. Or what I do remember, or have read, is that there are other things. I don't know whether that's just rumor though. So, but I'm sure there was. Yeah, it was guns. It was guns, wasn't it? It did have guns on there. I'm sure I saw.
We've got lots of guns in America. Come on, Walmart sells guns.
Oh yeah, of course, but it's not just America. Silk Road was an international thing, so it's kind of a. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not saying that he shouldn't be let out. What I'm saying is that it's difficult to change hearts and minds when it's not just as clear cut as selling some drugs online. That's the thing. It's not my decision, but it's just
think about it now. I'm seeing how they have like Twitter messages in The Big Short popping up on screen. In this, I think you'd have a little message every time like a drug sale was sold on the website. So like Ross starts it up day 1. Blah, 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 little cannabis deals, and then week 3, week 5, blah, 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 massive deals going through. I just think it's pretty amazing to see Ross more as like a startup guy, and to see this more of a Silicon Valley story, putting it in the Facebook social network category, where he's a normal guy with a computer, and he's going to start a database, and it's going to be amazing, and that kind of thing. And then it gets out of hand. It's the out of control story, where large amounts are being sold, or the violence, or the whatever, and then we have the down spiral. But maybe a short movie with a positive message could help him. I think mainly we're just looking at time here. If you look at our group here, everybody here is pretty much against the drug war. If you look at the people in the chat, they're pretty much against the drug war. At least our users are with this. But remember, we're a very small minority of this thing. The main people are not with us. So they're saying in the chat, yeah, like Breaking Bad, the guy with lung cancer turns out to be a drug kingpin. Although it's funny because Ross's mom keeps saying how he's not like Breaking Bad, and that he's not a big drug kingpin and a gangster and all these things. But again, if you actually watch the Breaking Bad show, which I finally did, and it was great, even if you haven't done it, it's great. But you come to be the more human side of the characters. You see more how the family is affected by the drugs, and it really, as a show, humanizes Walter White and the rest of his family. A very deep and interesting character. So yeah, maybe one of those with Ross would be good, but we'll see. I think we're out of topics here. We had one phone call; it kind of worked. I think that was a pretty good success. But I think we're heading towards the end of the show. Dan, do you have anything you want to say in closing? Maybe summarize some issues and then tell people where they can check out your work as the Crypto Raptor and that kind of thing.
Well, I think more importantly, just a little recap on actually, well, not more importantly, in general, I think my trip over to Las Vegas was absolutely awesome, and thanks for everyone that contributed. We didn't quite raise it, but it was enough to pay for the flights, and that's all that matters. And it was a great conference. I think there were some great speakers there. I think if you're looking forward to some interviews, Tom did some absolutely amazing interviews. With people from Max Kaiser to Tyler Jenks to David Silver, and Peter Todd. There's absolutely loads, and I think that they're going to be really interesting for people to catch up on. There's also a follow up to Yacht Chain with oh goodness, I can't remember his name now, but
Knox Cuddlesworth. Knox Cuddlesworth.
Boom, yeah, Knox Cuddlesworth. So watch out for that. That was really fun making it. I think we tripped some people out, but it's definitely a cool little follow up for Yacht Chain. But it was an incredible experience. Tom was amazingly hospitable, and his bro Adam, awesome guy. It was great hanging out, seeing Vegas, going to the conference, and and generally just kind of we had a bit of a discussion on how we're gonna do some of the shows and some other brainstorming. So hopefully we've got some cool things coming with the interviews, with the Yacht Chain follow up. I think you guys are going to really like it. And just look at following Crypto Raptor. Or you don't have to follow me, but have a look at, search for Crypto Raptor if you have some time. And I do some songs and stuff. Just to clarify, because there was an interview on me the other day, unfortunately, but it was made out as a proper rapper, and I'm not like a rapper. I don't see myself as a rapper. I'm just like an entertainer. So I'm not after Biggie Smalls' title as best rapper, in my opinion. I'm just a dude that likes to sing stuff, and hopefully I'm going to have some cool Disney stuff coming as well, some Bitcoin Disney shit.
Very good. And it was super fun having Dan here. I have this photo, proof of Dan. Look at that. It's a little bright today, but you can see he's right here with the background. It's real. That's how I Googled it. I faked that. It was all Photoshop. But no, it was great hanging out with Dan. Had a good time at Tone's conference. It was fun. We're out here in Las Vegas. Definitely agree with all that. Max, what would you like to say in closing? Go ahead.
Well, again, thanks for having me here on the show. It was absolutely fantastic. If you want to learn more a bit about Ross, we just finished this up here. Railroaded is a 6-part episode series that goes into the details of what happened in his trial. And watch all these shows, and you'll realize what a tragedy this is. And then right after, go there and donate to this Bitcoin address. One Ross. Don't do any of this shitcoin stuff. Or, well, you can easily upload your or download or get rid of your backs. So if you still have some XRP, no, please don't donate XRP to Ross. That would be horrible. No, but seriously, it's a great show, and definitely support him. It's a tragedy, and he deserves and he needs any single help that he can get. So absolutely. Maybe one little last story here that I'll just bring up here in closing is that the Penguin Shooter Lightning Network game is getting here a new release, and that is fantastic. So we already talked about Lightning Network games here on WCN a couple times. Had Satoshi's games on, and Donner Lab with Konstantin here. And Lightning Network empowered games are fantastic, and it really is it's nice to see that we can have many more opportunities now of having interactive gameplay that is incentivized by real world money, sound money, with Bitcoin, with instant and pretty much free transactions. It's fantastic. So check out here Donner Labs from Sputnik, Konstantin, and then also here the Penguin Shooter game. Really worth it. It's quite fun and nice to see what is possible here. And then, of course, also new shows coming here to the World Crypto Network. As usual, I'm really looking forward to the shows that I'm doing here on the Lightning Network. A couple Bitcoin to the Max episodes coming, so make sure you catch that. And also, we have a new show from Ben. And he does a phenomenal job here with the Bitcoin IoT tutorial, BTC IoT. And he has some really cool tinkery devices that you can play with and build yourself if you so like to, and really worth checking out. And then, of course, we also have here the little tally coin. If you'd like to support our work, I think we all have a tally coin. Tallyco.in/Twitter handle. So it's Hillebrand Max, Mad Bitcoins, or Crypto Raptor. And thank you very much for all your support. Thank you for leaving the like and the share. And of course, thank you for being active in the chat. It was, as always, nice chatting with you there. And thank you for the one caller, although he didn't understand us. But yeah, hopefully we can get a couple more callers here on the next show, hopefully very soon. And again, it was a pleasure hanging out with you, and see you on the next show.
Definitely. I agree with Max on Ben. That was pretty amazing. Ben's been making some cool tutorials. I've been checking him out here on the World Crypto Network. He's how to make a dead drop device, how to make a low-powered Bitcoin e-paper price checker, how to make a cheap fake Bitcoin hardware wallet, stuff like this you can check out right here on the World Crypto Network. We've also got Max's how-to videos on the Lightning Network coming out here. Check out the San Francisco Bitcoin meetup. My buddy Travis is still streaming that to us. Very cool. And all of Max's videos, he's been doing so many here. It's almost too much to keep up with, but if you want to learn something, we've got some great videos here about Nodal, Wasabi Wallet, Mimblewimble, Bisq, and then the Bitcoin Optech newsletter, all this great stuff. As far as my own schedule here, our goal is to keep doing Bitcoin Talk Show every Monday with the phone calls. It's a bit harder to get a phone call show when you're only doing it once a week. People really got to schedule it. So we're going to try to keep doing this on Mondays. Wednesdays, I'm going to be releasing my proof of work interviews that I did at the conference. I got about 10 of those in the can. So we'll be doing one a week for the next 10 weeks. Then we've got some other interviews that we're going to be scheduling. The Yacht Chain interviews will probably be scheduled on Thursdays. We've got a bunch of those. They'll go for a while. I have an interview with Trace that I'd like to try to get out today. He talked a lot about what they're doing in Wyoming. We've got some really interesting cryptocurrency legislation coming up there. More from Trace. You got to watch the interview. I don't want to spoil it all now. But thanks to everybody for giving us a thumbs up and a share. Be sure to subscribe down below, turn notifications on. And I don't know, follow me on Twitter at MadBitcoins. But that's about it for this show. Thanks for chatting with us in the chat. I got my voice back and everything. So until next time, bye-bye.